So the other parts of this that are related to Loren Eiseley is that he is, in many ways, the person that I quote from the most during this series of lectures, along with Carl Sagan. So so this is one of the quotes that I've taken, and let you read it. Eiseley's comments about the immense journey and the many stages upon life in which we are changelings who have started out not as Homo sapiens, but in playing roles from an infinitely longer age. And as Eiseley likes to quote, our identity is a dream. We are process, not reality. And so this is what has emerged through much evolutionary change. And the rise of Homo sapiens is in an interesting time of the Pleistocene. So we started as hunter-gatherers and then proceeded to agriculture. And this is a scene taken from the Pleistocene. It is during this period that the glaciers covered a great portion of the planet Earth, and we can see the various megafauna, saber-toothed cats, and others, and other things that might have occurred here that we know that the end was some 11,700 years ago, where there was another somewhat cataclysmic event that may have occurred that basically stopped the glaciers and changed everything. But during the Pleistocene, it's interesting during these advances, multiple times, we see the ice forming. And it's this time that the early hominids begin to proliferate and cover a good portion of the globe. There's the popular concept that everything is out of Africa, and now some of that is under contest as well, given the age of some of the fossils that have been found, particularly in Asia, and the multiplicity of species, hominid forms, that coexisted with one another. Another thing that is interesting is when we look at earlier climate changes, here is from the ice coring groups, of which the University of Nebraska, one of its chancellors, former chancellors, was brought the Polar Ice Core Group to Nebraska when he assumed the the chancellorship at UNL. And these ice ages, if you happen to be in Nebraska, may have reached as far in as northeast Nebraska, somewhat near the Norfolk area. Scandinavia had its own ice sheets, and this is a particularly interesting period because as the ice sheets advanced and receded, the primary species that existed here during this epoch was Homo neanderthal, and of course the cave paintings in Lascaux and Chauvet bear witness to their presence. And this is a somewhat technical slide. I'll just point out this is the in terms of the ages from little less than 11,000 years ago to over 2.5 million years. It turns out that our greatest evolutionary change really started occurring a little before here, where our forebears actually dropped down from the trees in Africa and started to emerge upright. So some of you may be familiar with Lucy and some of the other species at that time. Um, the And then getting back to Carl Sagan, December 30th in the year calendar since the Big Bang is the date that the uh, first primates with frontal lobes, the first hominids, appear uh, on the yearly calendar. And so I particularly like um, Carl Sagan's approach. One of our one of our participants this afternoon is Leslie Nyman, and her husband Mark, my oldest friend from college, uh, remarked on uh, their friend working for Carl Sagan, and that was one of the people that I would have dearly loved to have met because I uh, particularly like his approaches to looking at time from the standpoint of dividing it into a year and when did we appear. So it gives us some context in terms of time. And fire is also particularly important. Um, so So Eiseley, I love this quote, but there's every reason to think that the bulging cortex, which would later measure stars and ice ages, was still a dim, impoverished region in a skull box whose capacity was no greater than that of the great apes. How we came to be is one of the, I call it great mysteries and yet to be divined completely. And Eiseley looks at fire as being central. By contrast, the first fires flickering at the cave mouth are our own discovery, our own triumph, our grasp upon invisible chemical power. Fire contained in that place of brutal darkness and leaping shadows, the crucible and the chemical retort, steam and industry. It contained the entire human future. And so um, I think Eiseley has a particularly uh, eloquent way of describing this particular period and the meaning that fire would bring to us. Also, something that I've kind of discovered fairly recently, and I wish Dr. Engelman was on with us right now, but I have heard about this tremendous bottleneck during the Pleistocene period, somewhere not quite a million years ago, revealing a population crash uh, that nearly finished us. So perhaps there were a little over a million of us, of our forebears at that time. And yet, the very intense period where there were climate upheavals, glaciation, and severe drought, that we may have lost gone from 100,000 to as few as 1,280. And at coming out of the bottleneck was a population less than that of Auburn, Nebraska, a small town. And the bottleneck was expected to have lasted a little over 100,000 years. And at the end of the bottleneck, uh, what they've been able to find is perhaps somewhere in the neighborhood of 27,000 individuals would emerge pretty quickly at the end of this period. And so there's been some work that I've discovered recently. Um, and as my sister has pointed out, in our family line, she has detected Neanderthal Denisovan blood in our genes. And it turns out during this population crisis, nearly 2/3 of the genetic diversity was lost during this. And then there's this software program that was developed. It's a statistical analysis, which my daughter-in-law probably recognizes a number of them at the bottom of the page here. And it is a detection that seems to indicate the top left-hand side of those 6 drawings there. I won't expect you to, it's something that I show the students, but I don't expect you to have much analytical interest in, except that it's able to somehow separate from a very small population and infer what might have occurred. And so some of the things that occurred were basically the joining of what is now chromosome number 2 in modern humans. And this chromosome 2 may have contributed to the divergence of modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. And it appears the fossil record seems to support that these 3 species would co-inhabit the Earth over this period, starting from a little over 800,000 years ago. So I'm not going to spend much time, but I thought you might, particularly Devin, might like to look up Dr. Fu, and he's a geneticist, population geneticist at the University of Texas Health Center in Houston. And he's the one that developed this to saying there may have been as few as 1,280 breeding individuals during the bottleneck period. Megafauna at this time, University of Nebraska Morrill Hall hosts a number of exhibits. Megafauna is what I think the University of Nebraska is most well known for. At one time, I had the pleasure in the 60s of seeing the Belukotherms, just massive, able to stand nearly 20 foot tall and at least 35 foot long. And so the variety of animals, and you can see the human being to give you a size context with respect to the megafauna. And it was a particularly violent time in terms of how do you limit populations and balances between different life forms, mammalian life forms at that time. And this could be very simply a scene in anywhere in the United States or Europe. And for those of us that are from Nebraska, it's kind of hard to imagine that we had saber-toothed cats and mammoths here. And then there's us, our ancestors, using fire for being able to trap mastodons and provide a excellent food source. There's a lot of conjecture as to what finally drove some of the megafauna into extinction, of which one of the theories is that we hunted them into extinction. That is certainly a possible pathway. Um, whether it's true or not remains to be seen. The incident at the Upper Dryas uh, may have also contributed to population decreases to total extinction simultaneously. And then Eiseley talks about the impact of the ice ages on the human psyche. The most recent glacial period is about 11,000 years ago. And I particularly love this quote from The Unexpected Universe. But out of such desolation had arisen man, the desolate. In essence, he is a belated phantom of the angry winter. He carried, and perhaps will always carry, its cruelty and its springtime in his heart. So this is one of the essays, uh, central essays in The Unexpected Universe. And then coming out of the Ice Age, we have the beginnings. We know that cave art, this is from Chauvet, some 30,000 years ago, and sculpture. This is now December 31st of Carl Sagan's cosmic year. And within 2 seconds of the new year, this emerges. And within 18 seconds, 28 seconds of the beginning of the new year, we see agriculture and megalithic structures. The megalithic structures were found within the last several decades in Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. And it's a fascinating discovery. We sometimes consider Stonehenge to be the great ancient marking place. This pushes it back from 3000 BC now to almost 10,000 plus BC. And the hunter-gatherers are now, it turns out by accident, something happened in the Göbekli Tepe region where certain wheat varieties started to emerge. This is an aerial view of Göbekli Tepe, so it's on my bucket list of places to visit. And it now contains a dome. And the dome, one of the towers that they have here, a pre-agricultural society, farming had not yet occurred. And this German archaeologist was the person who discovered this. He said, things don't look right here at Göbekli Tepe. And so he started digging. And then he started finding things. And this one, which you see, is possibly a memorial to the devastating event that may have occurred at the end of the Ice Age. And it claims that maybe there was a catastrophic comet that struck nearly 13,000 years ago. Well, that's interesting that this is marked at Göbekli Tepe, that something may have occurred. And here is, perhaps this is why the president wants to take over Greenland. It's because he wants to inspect the crater for himself. And this this impact crater is dated to 13,000 years ago. And the question is this the smoking gun that may have led to climate change that would contribute to the end of the megafauna? And here is some temperature data that has been collected from Greenland and shows some severe temperature depressions, which may have contributed to the extinction of megafauna somewhere between 13,000 and 12,000 years ago, as well as looking at some other things that may have happened in terms of methane levels and triggering Earth's cooling. I think this is interesting. You can see that tree sloth, the ground sloth and the mastodons, we lose evidence of them pretty much after this time. There may be remnants on certain Siberian islands where they may have, the mastodons may have persisted as pygmy varieties, but pretty much everything disappears after this, after this event. And I want to share with you also one of Loren Eiseley's conjectures is he was on a dig in western Nebraska in the 1933 expedition, and they were looking for rhinoceri, and he was on a small farmstead, and the girl came slowly down the trail one evening, and it struck me suddenly how alone she looked and how well alien she also appeared. Short, thick-set, and massive, her body was still not the body of a typical peasant woman. Her head, thrust a little forward, was massively boned. Along the eye orbits, at the edge of the frontal bone, I could see outlined in the flames an armored protuberance. She is the last Neanderthal, and she does not know what to do. We are those who eliminated her long ago. So this is Eiseley's recollections of that encounter by the fire when he was still a young man in college. Eiseley was somewhat criticized for this, saying the Neanderthals all died out by other eminent scientists at the time. But it turns out Eiseley may have the last laugh, because now with genomics, the evidence is quite clear that many of us carry certain percentages of Neanderthal genes within our body, and particularly Northern Europeans and Asians. Africans less so. And Eiseley contrasts other living creatures with humans. And I like this quote quite a bit. Animals are molded by natural forces they do not comprehend. To their minds, there is no past and no future. There is only the everlasting present of a single generation. Its trails in the forest, its hidden pathways in the air and in the sea. There is nothing in the universe more alone than man. He has entered into the strange world of history. And this is the quote that I probably always enjoy, find a great deal of comfort in reading, But out of such desolation had arisen man the desolate. In essence, he is a belated phantom of the angry winter. He carried, and perhaps will always carry, its cruelty and its springtime in his heart. So I think this is a really eloquent way of describing the rise of humankind, uh, written by Loren Eiseley. And here is a photo of him uh, and perhaps saying something about Yorick from Shakespeare. So this is a the presentation that I have for the unexpected universe, and hopefully you have a sense of from the context of the materials that I use in my class, having Eiseley as, you might say, the spirit guide to each of the discussions that I hold within the class. And